It's story time. 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 Okay, we are back for episode 12. Let's keep this ball rolling. I want to get to these Peillustrations sooner rather than later. We left off with the creature of habit. We were talking about the pros and cons of habit making, establishing a purpose and a point to your habitual practices. All the different types of habits you can have that can either be a form of docile engagement or active or solitary or communal engagement. All things that can either destroy you out of habit or construct you out of habit. But I was trying to excavate some points revolved around this creature of habit that resides in my mind space that has a big role in the way in which my mind palace that gives my memories and my thoughts and my purpose a place to live and dwell, where my thoughts dwell. The creature of habit that's responsible for the structural composition of that mind palace's like building materials. I feel like it was important to unravel that character, even though the character that I was observing at the time of that piece that you can see in episode 11 has grown and matured and has cleaned up a little bit. It was important for me to excavate the thoughts that I had at the time when I was identifying that creature within me that I felt like was an abominable creature that was leading me down paths that weren't comfortable. It was not great for establishing a dwelling place. They were purely a creature of habit, and they weren't aware. There wasn't a part of me that was aware of why that creature did any of the things it did. There was no higher awareness, so the creature just acted compulsively, impulsively, and the habits grew purely organically, which has its place, but I didn't deserve that organic nature. It was mostly destructive rather than constructive in terms of my emotional growth. Skill sets are a completely different facet of my growth. It's something that can come relatively easy, building practice around developing a skill, but this creature of habit who's responsible for this emotional root to all my actions, like they weren't growing, and that's why it was important for me to identify that creature so I could at least, it all starts with awareness. You need to identify the problem in order to have a dialogue with that problem and establish a better relationship with that. Not maybe problem's the wrong word, it can be at a certain point just to identify, but that problem is you. That creature of habit is who you identify as, because the creature of habit develops your environment around you, or not, maybe not even develop, but can eradicate the environment around you. Your habits grow out through action. But before we transition from the creature of habit to this piece, which is titled Where It All Stems, later on I thought I should title it Daydreamer for personal reasons, but I'm going to stick to the Where It All Stems. Trust my first instinct. But before we hop off into that tangent, or actually that point of this episode, I'm going to tangent as a weird continuation of trying to break the habit of thinking too deeply or too much or too seriously about the things that I've done, and to kind of loosen up. I have a habit of establishing complexities around what can be simplified and arranged in a more concise manner. And actually, this whole series is in hopes to find the words that reoccur so that I can establish a more concise means of describing my work, words that get to the point. Because this is why I don't write. I tend to say more than should be said because I think it all should be said, and it's kind of part of my drawing style too. I say more than I have to say one simple thing. And I've established that with my current style. I've kind of simplified everything into something I really want to say style-wise and artistically and conceptually, but I haven't found the words yet. So this is my randomly generated question segment, and followed by the art pun period of this segment. So the question that I got today was, have you ever considered yourself to be part of the popular group? No. That's a weird question. I've never considered myself to be among the popular group, but I have been in certain rings someone who is well known, whether it's for great reasons or not. That's not up to me, but I've tended to be, as an old friend used to call him and I, we were realm sweepers. We would kind of roam humanity and slip through the cracks of cliques and make an impact, represent ourselves in one way or the other that felt honest for that particular group, felt constructive, or like it added something to that group. And I'll move on from the we, but I would jump from group to group, and I didn't ever see any separation between group to group, even though the groups themselves of friends saw themselves as a separate entity. Because I jumped from group to group, there was no separation. I was like this hidden bonding agent between different groups in humanity. I've been involved with so many different types of people, but I'm kind of a chameleon in a way. Not like I'm pretending to be any one thing, but like each group unlocks a part of me, and that part of me that is unlocked is part of what makes that group particular to themselves. But I see what they see in themselves individually as a as one facet of who I am. And when I'm around that specific clique, whichever one, I tend to change into that color. But I'm the entire rainbow. At least that's how I see myself. But if the clique sees himself as blue, the blue in me starts to stand out, and I am like that. But because of that nature, my openness to be friends with so many different types of people, I have been well known, not for being great, but for being known in many different like aspects of human culture, at least where I am available. I think that's part of why I'm an artist, because art is a mechanism to slip through any crack in any time, in any era, if you can make it, and unlock parts of any group because you put out your honest and open and unfiltered self so that they can reflect on that, almost as if, or pretty much exactly as if they are meeting me and I am entering their space, and we are engaging each other in some sort of deeper conversation that makes me feel like I, through my work, can be exactly what they need in that moment and transform into what they see as helpful or relevant, and then they become something relevant to me because I had hoped that my work could reach anyone and everyone in a meaningful way. So yeah, I think that kind of answers the question, but also establishes why I might not be part of the popular group. I think a little bit too hard for most popular groups, which can get annoying for people that are primarily people pleasers, not in any bad way, but because that is the creature of habit they have, which is a great transition into the period of this segment, which is a little art joke, art pun. It goes like this. Which farm animal was also a famous painter? Now, this is a stretch, but it actually gets to a point. Vincent van Gogh. Because he's the GOAT. Yo, that man is so emotional and on point. Okay. We've shook the shookness, and we are ready to talk about where it all stems. It's weird. As I progress in this series, the previous work, because I thought about things while creating that work, tends to obviously push me forward, progressing in this series. But as I progress in this series, because of what I've established through internal dialogue in the previous piece, I tend to end up drawing something that comes before the piece. Like, it's almost backwards, but it's almost like the Benjamin Button syndrome of artistic chronological dialogue. Like, or is it the Tarantino effect? Or no, it's completely reciprocal. Like, I don't realize I started at the end until I got to the end, which I realized was the real beginning. So my point is I like to help illustrate this point so that you can see it appear as a pattern in all the future works, is when I was making the creature of habit, I kept asking myself, yes, this is the creature. Yes, they build the Mind Palace that made me think about who was building the Mind Palace, like when I was creating the Mind Palace. But then as I was rendering the creature of habit and their effect, I wanted to know where that creature of habit's energy stemmed from. Like, what drove the creature of habit? What drove the creature of habit? forward? What made them want to create or destroy? What inspired them? What was their muse, if they even had one? I just wanted to know where it all stemmed from. Like all of my habits, what was the driving force? The outcome was you build a dwelling space for your mind to cope and consolidate your experience here, but that wasn't the source of the issue. Just like the previous piece, that character that I rendered in the center to represent a part of me that I acknowledge. So none of this is an insult to anybody, but a recognition of a part of myself and others that we should all do with each other. We should all reflect on each other, and because we reflect on each other, we should see a part of each other in each other. That's reflection, like looking in the mirror. You see yourself, and then you see yourself see yourself. That's what a reflection does. So just like that previous piece, this character, he who shall not be named out of respect, stood for something that I wanted to grow out from. I wanted to draw this character first to, like, it was out of like a natural recognition. Like I was like, oh, I know what I'm looking for, but this kid, I'm watching him be his own creature of habit, but there's like a deeper recognition of their habits, and I was watching him try to solve them as an outsider. And we would have, somewhat deep conversations about daily issues, like things he was dealing with and what we both thought about it. And we'd just be passing a pipe around, like handling the issues, trying to get to the root of the problem. Like, where did it all stem? Like, why was he doing this? I'm not going to go into exactly his addictions, but he had an addictive personality that made him repeat himself in all these ways that led to him not learning from his past, and he would wind up in the same situation, hoping to have realized something from the last time it happened, but he wasn't learning from it. And because of this conversation I had with him and me recognizing he was having his own problems in his realm as I was having in my own weird psychedelic realm. So I put him as the main character. Like I learned through observing him as an archetype so that I could unravel parts of myself. And at the time I've deleted everything from my computer that could, tie me to anything. But at the time I was going out tagging, like at weird hours of the day, or it was like I was taping off of tagging, and I would write the word milk. I would spill milk. I would almost suckle the teat of my identity through spilling this milk. There was a whole lot of, and I was milking it for what it was worth. There's a whole lot of milking analogies in my creative world that was like a foundation of my OCD for identifying who I am, and it becoming a compulsive nature, and tagging became like an extension or an expression of that compulsory nature to know who I am. And but milk was a big thing, and we talk about that stuff, like things that we didn't really understand, and tagging was one of those things. I didn't really understand why I did it. It's like asking a cat, why does it piss where another cat pissed? or was, or why is it marking these things? Maybe just to know where they were, or that they even exist, or that it even matters. But we really don't know. It's like a natural phenomenon to mark your space, as a way of recognizing your existence. And I because of this milk and these conversations, I realized that we were acting on things in life and trying to leave a mark that was our signature move. And that could become the repetitive action, to establish some sort of signature, and then we would identify ourselves with that signature. And because we had a pride over that particular way of responding to things or acting upon things, that would end up repeating itself, like the millions of times that I wrote milk, and the millions of times this kid made the same mistake, leading to the same signature, same pattern. But because of the whole milk relationship, it always made me think of like what the state of mind around consumption revolves around. Where does the idea of consumption, like me consuming this culture or a form of expression as a means of, it's like you express to consume an idea, you express this outward action to consume an idea, but it's just because you're not receiving something physical back, that doesn't mean you're not consuming. But it made me think of the first time, I don't know how many people even think about this, but the first time we all ever consumed something separate from like the direct elements of, let's say, air. Like it was our mother's milk, whether that is a replicant of that nutritious substance, or if you're fortunate enough, the real deal, like the first thing that the body can consume, otherwise it would get sick. And it's a delicate relationship. I don't know much about, I can't really speak for, but I know there's a delicate relationship around how much a baby should drink of that milk. But that's a whole different world that, anyone out there can jump into that rabbit hole. But it made me think about the mother's teat as the first trigger to surviving on what we consume and establishing a rate of consumption, a healthy relationship with that consumption. How organic or artificial is your consumption, or just the ideas of having either or, whether you are a formula or you are like an organic substance straight from the animal. Like just the idea that one thing that you consume could be artificial and one thing could be sourced in nature. But I felt like everyone around me, because I was thinking about that, I was like looking at everybody like we all started at the same place. Like we all stem from the same root of this idea that we are bent on consuming to survive. Whether it's it starts with our body, consuming something for our body to survive, but then ideas become things that want to live within us. And we start consuming, or I don't know if it's a chicken or egg, or it's something that's natural that drives us to that thing to consume it. Because we consume that out of nature, we end up wanting to feed it, to keep it, to make it grow big and strong, like milk is known to do, big and strong bones. But there's this idea that I was realizing that if you get into something that at the same time gets into you, like let's say skateboarding, just for shits and giggles. You get into skateboarding and you start seeing that you can do a trick, and you want that trick to get better and better and better. Or you want to learn that next trick, and you want to learn that next trick, and you want to learn how to do that trick onto a rail. You want to do that trick over a gap or over stairs. And then you want to learn how to do the next trick over stairs, and you start feeding this desire that you want to grow and grow up into something mature. And then when you stop skating, at least it's something I went through personally, when you stop skating, you feel like that part of you is dying and getting weaker, and then you go back to skate after like 6 months of not skating, and you can't land those tricks. That part of you, like a limb fell off that you were growing, and that part of you can't, it's harder for you to unlock. Like, it's easier than the first time you ever tried because there's like that phantom limb, but it's harder for you than it was when you left it. And then because of that, many people can get traumatized by that, like, ego death, sort of, where they lose that, like, they're not tapped in, and like they almost, because of that, go in hyperdrive, because they're like, no, I got to keep this thing alive. I got to keep this thing alive. I got to keep consuming this practice. I got to keep producing this habit, like, so, because if I keep this habit up, other things will grow in tangent or as a result of that practice, that series of habits, that pattern building. And so, things like that are all over us, or all around us, all within us. We all have these different branches of ourselves that we want to keep alive, and we consume, like, as a skater, we would consume videos. Let's say as a physical thing, we would consume videos of other skaters doing different tricks and doing things we've never seen before. And because we consume that, that feeds this part of ourselves that is consuming itself, and it leads to more compulsory behavior that leads to more habit building, in order to try and do that thing you saw that's revolved around your fascination with that one thing that is the source of your personal growth, and in some cases spiritual growth, depending on how seriously you want it to grow, how far you want to ascend in this particular skill set or concept. It doesn't have to be as physical as skateboarding, even though skateboarding is conceptual. You have to imagine the moves before you do it. Or the imaginary process is related to your organic motions, and there's this, it is conceptual, but some things are just like ideas that people can kind of fall victim to, and the life and the cultures that they live can lead them, like, those are things that they consume, experiences that they consume, that can leave marks in the beast that is that creature of habit, and will make that creature of habit act as a result. And then it starts to build your personality, because of the effect something has on you, your expression, but that the things you're consuming, that milk that you're drinking from the universe, or more directly, the Milky Way that we are a part of. Like, we are sipping from the teat called Earth of the Milky Way. However, there could be multiple teats. This could be a cow with multiple udders, and there could be several Earths that serve as the teat, where a part of the universe, sentience, sips from existence and then grows up into this mentality and becomes something to live off of, the nutrition of the universe. I might have digressed there a little bit, but you get my point, that the consumption process, there's no bounds to what level to observe and acknowledge this relationship we have with consumption and what expresses itself from that relationship you have from what you consume. And because you consume certain things, your expression can resemble that thing that you consume. Like, you regurgitate in a digested manner. At the time, I was dating a lot. I was still in college, and I was involved prior to this piece um, with just women that I'd meet at clubs or raves. Not even in my town. I'd go to a different city for a rave, and I'd meet these women, and I would establish quick, flowing to the next relationships out of habit, not because I knew that it was going to finish off quick, but because it was a habit that I had, that I consumed a bad breakup where I felt like I got everything I needed from one thing, and then because I couldn't find that anywhere, I ended up finding little bits from personally deprived moments, like where I was never going to find what I wanted. They're not to offend anybody, like everyone, we're all on the same page here, but I was roaming around my universe, my own personal universe, to find a teat to consume my muse that would inspire the next artwork. Because that was the detrimental experience I had from separating with my previous partner. That she was an extreme muse that inspired so much for me. Like, so many images would well up because of our engagements with each other. And when I lost that connection, I felt like I lost my muse, and the only thing I had was what was left in me and the people that were directly around me that I almost didn't recognize until this major character was separated, or we separated from each other. And then I would go around town to find sources of this conceptual milk. I'm not even a tit guy. I'm an ass guy. I love hips because the hips don't lie. I'm a love handle guy. Like, I call my pencil my love handle. But I'm like, this isn't even a fascination. I've had a ton of different people talk to me about this piece and be like, is this about the overconsumption of porn in our culture these days? And no. I find porn to be boring. Like, it's crude and not deep. But the symbol of the teat, the mother's milk, this idea that I could find a source of full breasts conceptually that held this milk for me to consume so that I can grow big and strong as an artist, as a creative, as a conceptual, as a philosopher. And part of this desire to find my muse led me all over to establish these weak connections with all these different micro partners. And this is almost like a symbolic map of the Milky Way that I traveled, looking for my Earth, a space where I could dwell and build a community of thought from. Otherwise, every other planet did not have I did not have the chemistry I needed for my biology as a conceptual. So it was like deprived, like traveling to Mars and being like I could see something growing from here, but it would take a lot of work to make this happen. I'm not in the place for that. Let's move on to another part of the Milky Way. I love just the pun nature. It's all about consumption, and I wish you could see this in more high detail, like how intricate the fingers were done and how intricate the nipples were done, and everything's so different. Like, they all look the same, like there's patterns, but every single breast is from a different source. Some of them were images that I took of friends who it was consensual, and they knew their faces weren't going to be in there, and a lot of them enjoyed the idea, not like draw me like your French girl or whatever. Like they enjoyed the idea of being, not knowing my internal dialogue, but being a part of a piece, a bigger piece. And so some of these are friends of mine, not friends, micro partners, and some of them are sources on the internet that helped me fill the space to connect lines because they fit right. I wanted this all to tessellate, like I wanted to understand that as random as many things are, if you make the connection, they will blend into each other perfectly and tessellate with one another, and there is no real separation from any other thing, because your transition from one thing to the next is smooth, even if it's aggressive, even if it's interrupting, even if it's like traumatic, it's smooth. It will fit with the next thing that happens in life, and it will look something like this. But there are parts of your life where it's like each of these lines I saw as a trajectory of orbit, and my mental path would travel through all these different occurrences in order to find this muse, that I wish I knew I wasn't going to find it in a partner, at least not the muse that I was looking for at the time. But there was this trajectory of like that was revolved around gravity, the gravity of what pulled me to something out of desire or interest or curiosity. I don't know the mysteries of gravity, but it's there, and it makes things revolve around each other. And I felt like I was a meteor or a comet that would travel through and around the different gravity wells of these sources of matter, what mattered to me or what I thought mattered. And I roamed around all of these nipples, which were like planets to me, or stars. Like this is like a whole universe or galaxy of stars that hold a big well of gravity, and they have this light that illuminates you and makes you understand a part of yourself as you travel around it. You understand both the part that is illuminated, but then you also understand the dark side of the moon, technically, of yourself as you revolve around these different focal points. And the nipple was the symbol for focal points that I would find myself revolved around in the journey for my muse, to know where my desire for anything came from, to know why I acted in any way, to know why I acted in ways I didn't know I was acting in, to just be aware of these different parts of myself through illumination and observing the darknesses of myself, to hopefully understand what and who I am in this universe, and why I may have affected this partner in order to, wind up where I found myself. But then, I mean, you could stare at these all day. Like, it's like looking into a nebula photo, like from the Hubble telescope. It's like, I don't know. It's beautiful, but not in a, like, oh, wow, titties. Like, I mean, anyone out there could see it that way because they have their own perception of the female form. But I was looking at this source of consumption as the filter for which I observe the breasts, and where where the idea of consumption first came, and I liked how all these hands that were grasping them hold them in different ways with different intentions, to frame them in different ways. Some of them are squeezing them for the milk because they're deprived or desperate. Some of them are just cradling them because they understand, like they understand and respect them and want to protect them. Some of it just showing them off because it's just like egoic to understand something. Some of them aren't being held. Some are like the holding is being rested upon them. I just feel like there's so many relationships between the hands, which make things happen, and the breasts, which are the source of understanding consumption, or the source of consumption itself. Like the relationship between the thing that acts and the source of consumption being related, and how you hold these things, how that changes the way you appreciate what you consume and what you do thereafter because of that appreciation or lack thereof. Some people are masochistic with their form of consumption, and they will slap them around because that's what satisfies them. But that's everyone's got their own deep-rooted relationship with the titties of life. But bringing it back to the character, the archetype that made me think about where it all stemmed, and the conversations that led me to unravel this illustration, this journey through pencil. It's like understanding all of this was like a form of, like, I took it in, like I sipped the J, which is always a symbol for establishing a point to achieve. Sip the J, and that point was to understand where this all stemmed. This archetype took a sip of the hope to understand themselves and where their actions stem from, like what drives them to do that. So as he sips it, he exhales this understanding, this recognition, this awareness, this evidence of inhale, that exhale of the puff, the journey through the journey through establishing a point that you travel towards to reach a point of that point. And when you exhale and you express that point through the journey, it's like you're staring into the smoke and watching the light hit it with your new understanding of that point, of that ritual, to establish an understanding of that point. And depending on how you feel, almost like looking into a Rorschach blot, you will see what you need to see in your expression that will lead you to that next drag, that next puff, towards the same hope to understand, in this case, what is my muse? What drives the creature to build the structures they need to build in order to form a larger foundation, in order to establish a mind palace where my understanding of myself can dwell. And this kid is funny. This kid's really funny. I love this kid. Regardless of our little falling out, like we still are in touch with each other, whether we talk to each other or not. We have access. He liked one of my posts recently. But this dude is hilarious, and I wouldn't have chosen anybody else to exhale this understanding of myself, because whether he has established this or not, he went to school in hopes to become a judge, which I find really funny because I am sitting on the high chair, banging the gavel, talking to my clients and the jury and of myself, and I'm trying to establish whether I'm guilty or innocent of any one thing. And I liked him being on this chair, and to tie into the original motif, which is the cannabis plant, which is the symbol for the life force, something to experience, like the almost like the black matter of the universe that establishes anything to form because of it or within it or around it. I built this chair where he was to judge this self-awareness, this outcome, this to judge their actions, to understand what led to the crime, for lack of a better word. And these are the stems that were left after hand breaking all the nugs off of the stem. The nugs are the thing that you puff. They're the experience that you want to have. But then it's what I really wanted out of this was to understand the structure that blossomed into the experience. Like, what was the thing that led to the experience? Like the driving force, the stem of this blossoming experience that I was captivated with. And because I was captivated with the nuggets, the texture of life, it was easy to overlook the stem. But because I was trying to understand where it all stems, it was natural to think, because I drew the chair after I drew him, and I was like, dude, like, he should be sitting on the thing that I overlooked. The thing that was almost denied in the last piece. But you saw that the stems were being collected in one little spot that the creature of habit did not pay attention to. But there were these characters that would take turns taking one stem at a time through the point that was like the little point of a word bubble out to, and I didn't know at the time, but I knew that the stems held something that I wanted to recycle into a new awareness, and they were taking the stems to this place to help build this archetype's chair for it to sit on and dwell on these thoughts, to understand where the substance stemmed from, what is the next connecting dot. And it was the stems, and I formed them, and I arranged them in ways in front of me and drew them from life to get them accurate. And then I built this chair through rearranging the stems themselves. And it's funny that all of this bud is the textures that fill this river, these waterfalls, the spring of consumption, what was to emerge from the teat and spill out to be consumed, to live upon, is what blossomed from the stems that I used to build that chair. And I find it funny that the stems rest upon the what blossomed, rather than the blossom being above or around the stems. Like, I feel like the stems come first. Like, they are at the top of the hill. They're the thing you should know more or recognize more deeply than what comes from it. What comes from it is inevitable. That's the first thing you see. It's the first thing you consume, is that essence of life that you have picked from your availability. But the stems are where you're going to understand, like, where you sit, like where are you mentally to dwell upon these things. Also, I love how this was before Crocs really blew the hell up, but he threw the back flap, the heel flap over the front. And I feel like it said so much about my mental state, like this almost lazy approach to understanding this. Like, I never really wanted to understand it. I wanted somewhere to find convenience in understanding this. And the t-shirt with the boat shorts and the Crocs with the back flap over the foot, I feel like it just said so much about my attitude. Even if I did all this work, almost did all this work to avoid the real work. This was just the smoke that was exhaled from the real work was to take the drag, which can be a drag sometimes. And I wanted to be able to conveniently, like, after the fact, just kick my shoes off and fall asleep and, like, forget about it. Fall into a dream world, hopefully, and just rock back and forth. And or like, even this, it's like a rocking chair. He doesn't really want to be grounded in any one thing. He wants to be able to rock back and forth and be comfortable, and this laziness to understanding this higher state of mind, which is exhaling out in front of them every time they inhale. And I feel like we're all caught up with the inhale, that form of consumption that we aren't actually seeing what comes as a result, and we're not seeing what the result, like the source of the result, the exhales results, like where that stems. Like, we're like in between the evidence and the source. We're just stuck in this state of mind where we consume, and we build these habits out of consumption. And those habits are almost like the natural, like, inclusivity to, if that's the right word, to just rock back and forth. Like, just go forward and backward, but where are we going? But back and forth. And to keep, like, tapping into my, like, recognizing my relationship with my community and experiences I had, and tapping into memories that I felt relevant, and trying to just capture these moments in my life where, like, they were like moments that happened when I revolved around meeting somebody that I felt was going to solve my deprivation of muse, of inspiration, whether it was friends that I met or these partners that were like hopeful projects of mine. Not that they were, but their effect on me. I was hoping to get a result, and that, in hindsight, super selfish. But I was selfish at the time. Like, I didn't really. I wanted to understand myself, not others. But in this weird new habit, I was trying to recognize and be hyper aware of those around me in hopes to combat to combat that, like, compulsion to only think of myself, not because I think I'm the most important thing, but because I need to think of myself, because there's a problem that stems in myself that needs to be solved before I engage with anybody else around me. I don't want to spread this problem into my community. It's like selfish, but it's selfless because you're trying to, or I was trying not to bleed on anybody. I recognized there was a wound in me. That initial breakup led me to understand, like, there's a problem. Whether I was able to express it to that previous partner or not, whether she would give me the time of day anymore or not, that's not important. It had its effect. I saw the wound. Didn't want to bleed on anybody. Didn't want to get anyone else sick. I just wanted to understand myself. But here, underneath this understanding of myself at the time, this new practice of hoping to come to a conclusion via rocking back and forth, inhaling, exhaling, like, metaphorically speaking, all around me were these moments with my community. Like, just meeting different people, having different engagements with them, just connecting with people, whether it was intimate or in groups or on my own, or like with third wheels, like that whole effect. I got my little kitty over here, and they're all living off of the substance. They're all not aware of the stems. They're all moments where we are just living off of the blossoms of the stems, the roots of all of this. We are all just engaged with, all these characters are engaged with life. Like even here, like you'll see two characters that are hidden in the cave, one character that's aware of the two characters that are hidden. There's like a little baby over here, like walking towards this windmill. This windmill is just this idea, like it's like, I feel like this was like I was looking inside. This is all in the out. It appears as like the surface, but I feel like this was like an X-ray, like a slice of what is inside this larger teat that is the source of all of this that we all live upon, the grandmother. And there's this churning force that is processing and almost building the energy, like it's like a not a windmill, like a water mill. Is that what it is? I just knew what I wanted here, but it's like a mill that, it's actually these bowls. They're slides from my pipe at the time, and they're packing bowls of life, just packing bowls of life and being processed. And they're trying to build energy based off of the flow, natural flow of life. And that's like this, the heart of this functioning flow space that keeps going. Like the flow space drives it to keep going. And all these people kind of live off of that energy. And I love these fireplaces that I kept building, where there are people that revolved around these big gravitational light sources of awareness of each other and self-awareness and awareness of the moment. But they're almost all captivated by the light, and they're not thinking much about the source of all of this. Like, what is there to really be grateful? Like, what is the building block of all this life that we get to enjoy and consume? Like, got this little dude on his own fishing from the source of life. I put a little detail. These are all like things that actually, like, I was trying to capture memories. I'm not going to say them specifically because I don't want to just talk forever about this, but like resting my head on the lap, like right here, like these are things that I was experiencing, that I was almost like an artist rendering images from a town. Like they're out at an eatery or a cafe, and they took sketches of the people around them, or sketches of their friends with them, or like sketches of how they felt in the moment. Like that's what these were. They were not drawn all at once. They were drawn at different times when I had these moments where I either visualized or experienced these relationships with myself or others. And even right here, you can't really see it all too well, but there is a chair I used to draw all of these on. It took a lot out of me to get rid of that chair. It was all torn up and shit from my cat, but he's sleeping curled up on that chair, kind of isolated in this moated area. And I felt like my cat on that chair, isolated from the world, with the whole world around me, but no access to get across it. I'd had to swim through it, wade through life experiences to get to any sort of other, plot of land to experience all these other things in life. But while I was working, I was on this chair trying to understand what the hell all of this has been. Almost like what this character is going through. Like that's how I felt. And to tie it back, like I was just trying to understand what the problem was. Why does this keep repeating? Like, what am I not learning from these things? Like, what can I learn to learn from these things? But in that place, you're removed from your expressions and the source, or the self-expression, and then the external expression. You're removed from it in hopes to understand something about yourself that taps into what connects you from one to the other. um, that stem between the soil and what blossoms. And actually, this I said like it's the grandmother's teat, but it's actually this one large breast that's peeking out from the void. It's like the points in previous pieces, like they emerge from this void space that is the purest representation of life, and it becomes this awareness that peeks through. And what I was trying to be aware of was the source of consumption, that first teat that was suckled in order to live off of, what was the first sip, like what was the first thing the universe ever consumed to understand its relationship with consumption, or that led into this compulsory nature with consumption. And the rocking chair is this silhouette for this nipple, and that spring well is like the areola, or what is that? The space around the nip itself. And the rocking chair is almost like this stimulation, like rubbing the nipple back and forth so it bounces back and forth. And we make this contact with the source of consumption, the source of the Milky Way, the mother's milk, this desirable essence that we can live upon, and we stimulate it to understand more about it. Almost like our source of consumption is stimulating. That's why we engage with it. But it's the things we engage with and the things that stimulate us that make us understand more about it ourselves. But I really wanted to know why I wanted to stimulate myself in the way that I did on a personal level. Like, why is that my kink? Like, we all understand what makes us feel good, but we don't really understand why that makes us feel good and why we're drawn to make ourselves feel good in that particular way. That's what I hope to understand from this drawing. And also, to do this duality, I always love to look at one side and then the exact opposite, like that yin and yang. And here, there's this character that peeks over the edge. I always like to suggest that there's something beyond what we can see, something beyond what we are aware of, no matter how expansive that awareness is. There's a whole other side that we need to access. And so I put this little character right here, peeking over the edge. And then there's another character over here that's sleeping and doesn't care. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. They're tired of it. Like, it's like a docile, like, don't need it. Like, I'm over it, versus this curious where, like, they probably walked this whole expanse, met everybody on this journey in hopes to understand themselves, and then are like, wait, there's a whole other side of this nip? Like, I gotta see that. Got my cat over here, too, with this little ball of yarn. That little symbol for curiosity and that Schrodinger cat, like, what is and what isn't, and what is to not be and what's not to be. Like, just this up in the air of awareness. Like, you can be aware of something but that denies every other potential for awareness. Like, I always love that little symbol. I think that's why I use them. I mean, my cat slept in my chair all the time when I really wanted to work, but he also symbolized on that chair that up in the air state of mind of, like, my Schrodinger self sitting on the chair trying to understand whether the cat's alive or dead in the box, symbolically, of course. But all right, I feel like I said probably more than I should have, but again, I'm doing this primarily for myself in hopes to find the words that are relevant and words that I might ignore, or words that just kind of are disguised in other habitual words in my head, like a word appears and you're like, no, 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 or like, no, 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 or like, let's think about that later. And because it's in your mind, it has no real concrete place, like a recording here to exist. It disappears into all the other thoughts that distract you from looking at that thought again. So some of those thoughts may have come across, but I'm glad I said it. This is all unfiltered, unedited. I'm trying to find out where it all stems. This whole story, the whole Peillustration story. I'm trying to do this piece again via this journey, like through all the pieces to where I'm at now. To like my current Peillustration series is this large cloud that I'm exploring within my own internal dialogue / story line, where I gravitate around these major concepts that I find important and relevant. But all right, I can keep talking, but I'm not going to. We'll have to wait until the next episode, episode 13. But before we get into that eventually, let's watch one more episode of the Peibi Playhouse. But before you enjoy that little piece of sunshine, I want to wish you a good day, a good night, and a good time in general. Peace. I have arrived. Prism Peibi. Let's see if 1, 3, or 7 are home. I got something super fun to show them. It's a pendulum. 1, 3, 7. You here? Let's ask the pendulum. Is everyone home? Oh, they are. Let's see. Oh, hey, number 3. What's up? Yeah, what's up, Prism? Just playing some gang gang. Oh, hey, number 7. What are you up to? Oh, I'm just grilling some pineapple on the Barbie. Number 1, wake up. Come on, shut up.